Good morning, and thank you for joining our webinar today. Today, we are here to discuss strategies on reopening your restaurants in this new normal we're faced with. When it comes to the task of reopening dining rooms, I know most of you right now are probably feeling a bit overwhelmed, just like the rest of us. It will be critical to remain tactical in your decision-making right now to ensure that your restaurant successfully eases back into a fully operational business. Hopefully today's discussion will be able to assist you with some of the tactics that are surrounding this. My name is Lynn, and I am joined today with Brian McCaig. Brian and I are both client advisors at RSI. Our client advisory department offers a wide range of consultation services for our clients. Please feel free to reach out to us at any time with any questions on all of the additional services that we offer. So today, some of the topics we're going to be reviewing is if and how you should reopen, and the many facets that will go into the reopening process. We also wanted to review how technology could and will play an important key role in your future success. We're going to talk about the importance of continuing to build your top-line revenue with marketing, digital hospitality, especially, and other revenue sources. And finally, we want to help you have a better understanding of all of the available resources that you have access to, not only with RSI, but with our multiple partnerships as well. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So first and foremost, it's important to know we are not going to go into the details about the specific federal, state, or local restriction in today's webinar. Make sure that you are referencing your local state restaurant associations and government websites for what's going to be required in your specific area for opening up. The National Restaurant Association also has posted a lengthy guideline to assist you with knowing what the CDC guidelines are. And also please note that these are changing daily. So stay informed and up to date as they continue to evolve, especially in your specific area. I think right now, before we move on, it's a perfect time for our first poll question. So Brian, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, let's do a poll question. Actually, before we get into the poll question, it's a good time for me to remind everyone on the webinar today that there's a Q&A section of the webinar, and we absolutely encourage live questions to come in too. We're going to try to save some time at the end of the presentation for that, but we've gotten feedback that people love hearing what's going on and sharing best practices and that kind of thing. So hopefully we get an opportunity to share some of that and answer questions that I used to be a teacher, so share questions that would be helpful to share with the rest of the class because everyone can benefit from it, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Now let's get into our first poll question. We're going to do a few of these during the presentation today, and it's a good way to keep this presentation interactive. So it should be up on your screen now. And the first question is, what are you the most concerned about as you consider whether to reopen? Maybe sales, maybe trying to predict consumer behavior, sticking to those state and local guidelines, supply chain predictability, or staffing or rehiring for your restaurant as well. And a lot of the polls today, you're going to wish there was an opportunity to pick more than one answer. And we kind of did that deliberately. If you had to pick one, what do you think is the most true? So I'll give about 10 more seconds to get the answers in, and then we'll share with everybody else.
Yeah, I know I would definitely have every one of those on my list as well.
Yeah, a little bit of everything, right? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling. Okay, so the winner was probably trying to predict consumer behavior. We'll talk a little bit about that today. A lot of people also concerned with sales. I mean, top-line sales mean everything, right? And also staffing and rehiring. Got some people concerned with that as well. And the good news is we're going to talk about a lot of tactics for all those answers. So you came to the right place.
All right.
All right. So the first question that you should be asking yourself, and a lot of people are skipping this step, should you reopen? And the answer to this question is going to be different for every single restaurant. You need to ask, what type of concept are you? What's your actual seating capacity? What are your local governments allowing in regards to capacity right now? are you well positioned? Have you learned a lot from the past couple months? Have you been able to leverage to-go delivery, curbside sales? So all these questions need to go into should you reopen, but I really want to start with considering the financial impact. And that's going to bring us back to a break-even analysis. And I say back to because all the webinars that we've done that are COVID-19 related or pandemic related, we've brought up break-even analysis and how crucial and fundamental that is to understand, your business. And doing a break-even analysis is more important now than ever. And once you figure out, okay, if these are my expenses, my variable costs, and my fixed costs, and this is my break-even sales I need to do to break even, meaning to make $0 in profit, now I start to think about forecasting. We'll talk more specifically about forecasting in a few minutes here, but when you're trying to figure out, okay, well, this is my break-even number, this is what I'm going to potentially do in sales. I know it's a little bit of a guessing game right now, but you're going to make the most educated guess that you can. And then are you going to make a little bit of profit? Are you just going to break even? And maybe that's okay for now. Or are you going to have a little bit of a loss and you just have to ask yourself, can I weather the storm? I'm just trying to mitigate that burn rate during the pandemic. And when you're going through this, forecasting isn't like it used to be, right? You can't just say, I'm going to be down 5% from last year, or I'm going to be up 3% from last year because I'm building sales. As you're opening with limited capacity, and we're going to get a little more detail in forecasting here in a little bit, but as you're doing that, you need to factor in how much revenue do I generate per seat? And then you'll be able to understand more what you can do as the limited occupancy guidelines change. The real take home I want you to have here is 50% occupancy doesn't necessarily mean 50% down in sales.
I think that gets missed a lot. People just automatically assume if I'm, reducing my capacity by 50%, revenue will be, and that's definitely not the case. Yeah,
and it's going to be a different way to model out for every restaurant, depending on your brick and mortar and how that's set up. And yeah, it's a little bit of a teaser because we're going to talk a little bit more about forecasting here in a minute. I do want to remind everyone about, if you're an RSI client, the education and training section of the RSI website has the old webinars that Sydney and I have done. So if you're interested on, how do I manage and forecast or cash flow? How do those break-even analysis work? What should I be thinking about right now? All those webinars, we had a good time doing them. The recordings are up for your access there. If you aren't an RSI client, welcome. And Sydney and I will have our contact information at the very end of this presentation. So just reach out to us, and if you want a copy of any of those recordings, we'll shoot them your way. Or if you have any questions, we'd love to chat with you. Okay, so while we're speaking about the financial impact, and we aren't quite done, but we also want to talk about operational changes. And many restaurants in the past couple months have had to make some pivots, to say the least, and probably hopefully learned a lot from those recent pivots. So this could mean new costs, new revenue centers. So you need to ask yourself, are these part of your portfolio moving forward? And really, how will you be adjusting to consumer behaviors?
Yeah, and plain and simple, it really comes down to launch when you are ready. It doesn't mean that just because you have the ability to open right now because of the state opened it up, it doesn't mean that you're ready to open up. So it's okay to hold off so you are completely prepared for a successful launch. So your operation's unique to you. It's unique to the decisions you've already been making, before the pandemic hit, and it's going to be unique to the decisions you're going to make that you need to, to reopen with. And it's got to be independent of those surrounding you. We're all really close. It's a tight community in this restaurant world, and we call each other up and we ask for, advice and get direction and ideas. But it's important to remember that what might work for the guy next door or across the street might not necessarily work specifically for you. So, as Brian mentioned, ask yourself, what have you learned the last couple of months? How are you going to take this knowledge and apply it to long term? And that's really what you need to be focused on right now. You need to be strategizing now for the longer term. And I'm not just talking about the limited capacity open, but what happens when we are fully open again? And what is that going to look like going into the next year? Now that you've had a better way of managing the to-go and delivery, is this something that you want to maintain? Do you want to continue to increase this in the future? Was it so successful that you're considering to pivot to an entirely new concept? We actually have a couple clients that have decided not to reopen their full service dining rooms. They're going to remain a to-go type of place, and it's been really successful for them. They've really been able to make it work for them. So is that something that you can model out as well? Do you have the capacity to really do a great job with curbside and delivery? Does it make sense for you to continue to utilize those third-party delivery services? Or maybe do you need to pivot and bring that delivery in-house? Or do some type of native delivery or something like that? Are you going to be changing up your offerings? There's been almost everyone has made pivots to their menu, whether it be adding value meals or bulk packaging so they can bring in a new revenue stream because they have great sauces or something that a client, that your consumers want. What have your consumers wanted over the last couple months, and how are you going to continue to offer those over the next 6 months? All those different ways and things that you might want to pivot to your menu, value meals, senior menus, et cetera. Those are things that you want to think about. Another great revenue source over the last few months has been the to-go alcohol sales. And I know that some states are, expanding these, they're on a temporary basis or permanently. Check with your state, see what your options are on the to-go alcohol, because this has been a game changer for quite a few clients that really just embraced the to-go alcohol and started making bulk packaging and selling the alcohol. And it was really quite a big revenue generator for them. However you're going to pivot, it's going to be essential to understand how these newly created revenue centers are impacting your costs, your efficiencies, your staffing, et cetera. If you are making menu changes based off of the consumer demand, you need to make, needed changes for efficiencies, for execution, for to-go, et cetera, then it's going to be really important that you understand how these changes might affect your prime costs, especially, with the supply chain issues that we might be facing as well. You could have difficulty sourcing some of this product that you've had in the past, and this could make a huge factor into what changes you make to your menu. Have you properly costed out your new menu items to ensure they fall in line with your budgeted cost of goods? Do they hit, all of those ideal cost percentages and margins that you're looking for? Even your current menu, have you, looked at your menu engineering? Are those items, items that you need to retain? Are they maybe dogs that you might need to just completely remove from the menu? Or maybe you need to reprice things because your food cost prices and ingredients are going up and skyrocketing right now. Do you also need to make changes to the pricing? Or just rethink it, maybe you need to reduce the portions, et cetera. So not only do you need to review your current menu previously from COVID to see if you're still hitting that ideal cost measurement, but also make sure that you're looking at your new menu items and packaging to make sure that those fall in line with your ideal costs as well. Value has been a key factor for consumers over the last month and is going to continue to be a consideration. So you might want to think about reducing the portion sizes and reducing pricing just so that way you can, increase more of that top line sales through quantity. So whatever decisions you make, just make sure that you understand the impact that those are going to make on your cost of goods. But not only that, on your labor, your efficiencies, your execution, quality, and consistency on all of these products. You also want to look at the pricing fluctuations on all of your items. We're seeing a lot of changes on all of the pricing. So look at your trend reports in RSI and see the velocity. What are your high and lows? What's happening with those key ingredients, especially the ones that have the most impact on your costs. Reviewing all of these specific reports will be really key for you to understand how they're impacting your overall costs.
It's a good time for me to remind anyone, as you're seeing these cool reports up on the webinar, if you're an RSI client and you're unfamiliar with any of these reports, please reach out to your operations specialist. They'd love to take you through and show you the value of these reports. Make sure you're using them, especially now, more important than ever.
Absolutely. I mean, data is knowledge and power. Data is going to help you understand exactly where you need to focus your time and attention. So make sure you're looking at all of the really dynamic reporting tools that we have for our clients. And then your next step is going to be you've got to start forecasting out what those sales look like. You know, what is each phase going to look like? So Brian, why don't we talk a little bit about how you want to start forecasting over the next few months?
Yeah, so I mentioned forecasting is going to be a crucial step in the process, and it's a different beast now, right? And I want you to really think of your forecast when you're going in and forecasting your sales. I want you to think of this as different phases. And phase one might be what a lot of restaurants have been in the last couple months. You can't open for dine-in sales, and you're open for only to-go curbside delivery type sales. And phase two might be, okay, step one, maybe you can be open for outdoor seating, or maybe you can be open at 25% capacity. It's going to be different in every state and every local area. But for your restaurant, define phase one, phase two, phase three, and phase four. And then start to think about how each phase is going to have an impact on your dine-in sales and your to-go sales. And they're really two different beasts right now. No matter what your model was before, for most restaurants at least, your dine-in sales or your to-go sales have been a lot more probably than you ever thought you could do in to-go sales for a lot of restaurants. So as you start to open for dine-in sales at limited occupancy, as you increase that amount of dine-in sales, chances are it's going to take a bite out of your to-go sales, because people who work choosing you for to-go sales may start to feel more comfortable and come in for dine-in sales. So think critically and deliberately about how each phase is going to impact your restaurant. And I suggest for when you're forecasting out your dine-in sales, you really stick to your trends of 2019. Now, of course, I don't mean you're going to do 100% of what your sales were in 2019. For a lot of restaurants, that's probably not a realistic expectation. But start to think those year-over-year trends, those seasonal trends for a lot of restaurants are still going to hold true. It might just mean you're only doing 40% of 2019 dine-in sales or 60% of 2019 dine-in sales, and use the revenue generated per seat and the amount you're able to open for occupancy to try to calculate that and predict, okay, maybe in phase two, I'm open at 25% occupancy and my dine-in sales will be 60% of 2019. I'm throwing those numbers out there. It's going to be different for every restaurant, but think of dine-in sales when you're forecasting as a year-over-year projection. To-go sales, on the other hand, I want you to treat way differently. I believe that 2019 to-go sales have very little to do with what you're going to do in 2020, whether it's during the pandemic or as the pandemic slows down or post-pandemic or whatever you want to call it. These habits that were formed while sheltering at home, I strongly believe are going to be here more than they used to be post-pandemic. I think that goes without saying. So when you're projecting out your to-go sales, if you've been able to be open in the last couple months and doing to-go sales, and we've seen a lot of encouraging numbers in regards to to-go sales, use that as a baseline when you're factoring that into your forecast. And yes, as you open up dine-in sales, chances are it's not going to be quite as strong as it's been in the past 4 or 5 weeks, but start to think critically about, okay, well, as I open for 25% occupancy, maybe I'll be down 10% from my recent to-go trends. But what I really want you to take away from this is think of your to-go sales differently and think of them in relation to what you've been doing recently in your to-go sales. So define those different phases for your restaurant and use some kind of forecasting model like you see on this screen to make the most educated guess, and then just be ready to be wrong, right? You're going to try your hardest, but be ready to adjust that forecast and pivot as you see what really happens. But I think this is a great way to start, and I've said this before, but the worst thing you can do right now is just close your eyes and hope, right? You really want to lean in and eyes wide open, make the most educated guesses and forecasts you can to understand the impact that it's going to have as you decide to reopen. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
and I also, we've already started seeing this. We've had a number of clients that now have been open over the last 3 weeks for dine-in sales. And, that's exactly kind of what we're seeing already with them. They're still doing strong to-go sales. It's only been a slight decrease as they've started opening up their dining rooms. And, we have some clients that are only down about 30 to 40% on dine-in comp sales. So, it definitely does seem like it's coming back up, but the to-go is definitely not going to stop at this point. It's definitely going to be a large percentage of that. So definitely, that is what we're seeing, what Brian's talking about.
And that's a good segue, Sid, because the restaurants that are going to be more successful with this dine-in sales is the restaurants who are doing their reopening right. So the idea here, and the next question is, how do I reopen? And the idea here is you got to treat this like a new restaurant opening, like a grand opening, right?
100%.
Okay, so think back to your restaurant's grand opening when you first got into business. And I really want you to be loud and proud about that reopening. Sid said it before as well, though. Be thoughtful about the timing of your reopening. Make sure it's right for you. Just because your government says, okay, you can open now, doesn't mean you're ready, and you want to make sure you're ready to get it right. So launch when you are ready, and then we're going to say this a lot as well. Be ready to be flexible and ready to pivot to the guest needs as you see. And the loud and proud. Communication is going to be crucial for a successful relaunch. And I don't only mean communication to your guests, although that's crucial, but also to your employees. You want to make sure your employees are feeling safe and ready to go as well. Speaking of employees, in the last 8 weeks, many of you have had to terminate, furlough, let go of a lot of your employees in the last 8 weeks, and now you're potentially starting to think of that rehiring, retraining process. And this could be an ideal time to make that process easier. I want you to really think back 4 months ago, right? And think of your organization for HR materials and HR documents, everybody's favorite topic. But my question I want you to ask yourself, if you look back to 4 months ago, is there anything you would do differently if you had a chance to do it over again? Because a lot of restaurants, and I believe strongly in this, are thinking this is the perfect chance to get it right and to take the opportunity to do it right, to revisit those job descriptions, to make sure they have everybody's files in order. Consider going digital with paperwork as well. Gosh, better time than ever to take advantage of that. Again, creating a touchless work environment. There's a lot of companies out there that will allow you to, leverage technology, stay compliant, take advantage of WATSI credits, which a lot of restaurants aren't taking advantage of. All these things are things I want you to consider. Like I said, there's a lot of companies out there that will do this for you. If you're an RSI client, though, I do suggest considering Efficient Hire. It's one we've vetted out. We're really impressed with. We've seen some really good results from, and we also have negotiated pricing for being an RSI client and integration between our systems as well. So consider Efficient Hire if you are considering going away from the cumbersome paperwork. Okay. That being said, it's also crucial to make sure you're 100% ready to operate smoothly for that reopening.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You've got to set the standard, and it's a new standard now. So maybe you have established a decent revenue stream with the to-go or curbside. All those guests that have been coming to visit you and getting that and building the trust with what you've done over the last couple months. They're going to be looking pretty carefully at what you're doing to make sure that you're ensuring their health and safety as you continue to reopen. They're going to be seeing how you're setting up the dine-in process and signage and employee PPE and all of that stuff. So you've got to think all of it. You have to instill consumer confidence so they feel safe in returning to dining in. As we mentioned earlier, there are numerous resources, CDC guidelines, et cetera. Make sure that you're making your restaurant as touchless as possible. Spending your dollars towards the following is going to be a must. You've got to make sure that you've got signage, everything's clean, that you've got safety measures, that you've done staff training, food handling, wellness checks, et cetera. All of those things are going to be important for the guests to feel comfortable coming back into your establishment. Brian said it, it's going to be like when you first opened. This is your first chance to make another first impression. And you might only get this one chance. So you've got to gain the consumer trust. Trust will continue to be a theme. We've got to build this confidence now prior to opening. You've got to do it before you open, through social media, website, your local news station. You've got to market your reopening date and plans to keep consumers safe. Brian said it earlier, communicate what you are doing within the four walls. The more that you get your word out to your guests of all that you've done to make a safe and create a safe environment, the faster they're going to come back to you. You have to go above and beyond the guidance and regulations, not only for your guests, but for your staff as well. Not only do your guests need to have confidence, but your staff does too. So your staff training is imperative to a successful relaunch. Do they know exactly what all of the measures are and how they now have to behave within the four walls? They've been off for months too, so they probably forgot some of those menu descriptions and things like that. So properly train them on all of the safety sanitation practices, but understanding also what your new brand is, what your new culture is, what's your new normal, and just more than everything, make sure they feel safe and secure. You have to conform to these new practices, but try not to lose that social experience that we've been missing for months now, so just like in a new opening, maybe don't go with super tight labor models so that way you ensure a great execution and service to your guests. Obviously, with the CDC guidelines, there's going to be incurring additional expenses for getting all of this information, whether you're doing touchless faucets or paper towels or the PPE or barriers between tables or single miss. I mean, the list goes on of everything that you have to incur an expense for now. So due to these additional expenses, this is also a perfect time that you need to probably revisit your budget.
Always a good time to look into your budget. And Sydney and I actually did a webinar on this just a month or so ago, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stop telling you to do budgets. So also, Sydney mentioned, like a new restaurant opening, perfect time to get a budget in place or edit the budget you already had in place, because you better believe it's going to be a little different than you expected when you created that budget back in 2019. You need to make sure you're factoring in those new forecast models. If you're going to deliberately go heavier on labor to start, like Sydney and I suggest, budget for that. Just because we're saying go heavier to start doesn't mean there's no accountability, right? Be strategic about incrementally tightening those labor models as you go on. You're heavier at the start, incrementally improve it to make sure that you're still reaching your financial goals. As you're reevaluating your new normal, could be a good time to consider staffing requirements, could be a good time to look at your labor model. Do you even need an executive chef? Are you leveraging all your salaries to be leaders that are not only using their leadership skills, but also managing that operational labor and pitching in and helping minimize that operational labor? This is a good time to realign strategically in regards to that and think a little differently about your restaurant, about your business. Hear me loud and clear, though. I don't mean go super tight with your labor models. That's probably one of the worst things you can do right now, because you only get one chance, like we're saying, like a grand opening. You only get one chance to gain that guest trust, and trust is the word of the day. Gaining that guest trust. It's the new most important metric out there. A lot of restaurants are having to consider direct operating costs like to-go supplies and packaging costs and soaps and chemicals. A lot of those are changing. Set a budget for that. As you go through and tighten all your expenses when the pandemic first hit, and you really start, nothing makes you start to realize where every penny is going, like having to shut down. And as you're starting to rethink what your expenses are going to be, put it into your budget and factor it into your budget. If you're doing that break-even analysis, like we spoke about, you're looking at your variable costs, you're looking at your fixed costs, and you're going through and you're deciding where those need to hit. As you're writing your budget, keep circling back to that break-even to make sure you haven't changed it. Make sure it's aligned with your break-even metrics that you put in there. Because if you have a disconnect there, you may think your break-even sales are X, and it turns out you're budgeting for a whole hell of a lot different, and you don't want those two things to be separate. You need to make sure they're aligned. Yes, this is a daunting process. Not everybody really nerds out on these like I do. I actually love doing them, but you need to make sure you're holding yourself accountable to those financial expectations that you are setting. And like I said, be deliberate with every single dollar you're spending. All right, Sid, let's get into another poll question.
All right.
Should be up on your screen now. And the question is, which technology will you be adding that maybe you didn't have before? And this may be another opportunity for a multiple choice one. We just want you to pick the one that's most true for you. You may say online ordering, a new reservation system. You may say HR onboarding and HR tracking, touchless menus, touchless payments. Or maybe you aren't adding a new technology. All right, I'll probably give about 15 seconds to get it in. Sydney, we've heard a lot of cool stories about restaurants that are using technology to their advantage right now.
Absolutely. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit more about the leveraging technology, but it is key. I mean, we've already been going towards a digital, world, and it's even more so now, especially with everything that happened. We're all working from home now, et cetera. It's digital, and technology is going to be, where we have to pivot to, and we're all going to have to jump on board with that. So interesting to see these results, Brian.
Yeah, interesting to see the results. I'm going to go ahead and end the polling. All right. I have to say I'm not surprised. The majority is doing some kind of online ordering that they didn't do before. I think that's a really smart move for those restaurants. If you didn't have it before, it's become a necessity now, online ordering. So not surprised, and that speaks really directly into our next slide.
Sure does.
All right. So as you're considering reopening and you're considering that new business plan, you need to think about if it's appropriate or worthwhile to leverage technology into that customer experience. Our best guess is that consumers will be demanding with their wallet some new expectations. Sydney, a lot of restaurants are going towards reservation-only dining to start off as they start opening. There's a lot of good reasons to consider that, right?
Yeah, I mean, not only do some states have the stipulations on it, but really it's the best way to manage the flow. And, if you are having a limited capacity seating, that's the biggest thing, is managing the flow inside the restaurant. So it's key to have like a good reservation system, or at least a virtual wait list. Again, it's all going to go mobile. Mobile, from your website to your ordering systems, to your payment systems, to your, menu. That is really where you're going to need to go to. And the virtual wait list is going to be key, because you don't want them all standing around the front of your restaurant. You want them to be able to, check in, text message them when their table's ready so they can be walking around and not all congregating. I definitely think that you've got to make sure that you have the host stand. Fortunately, it's summertime. Put them outside so that way you have full control over the flow inside the restaurant, and reservations and virtual waitlists are going to be key for that. And OpenTable, Yelp, RASI, they're all rolling out new features for restaurants and customers, on this, expanding their platforms to include reserved seating for bars and wineries and all sorts of businesses. So you definitely want to look into that.
Yeah, well said. Also, delivery service consolidation. So a lot of restaurants, when they switched to a to-go only model, picked up different third-party delivery services. And that can be a lot to manage. It can be a lot physically to manage in regards to tablets, and can be a lot of overwhelming reports and information. I would be careful with too many tablets. You can use a service like It's a Checkmate or Chow Now that actually consolidates delivery tablets into one platform and consolidates the reporting, which is important to me too. Those reports, again, can be overwhelming and hard to understand. And wait, what are these fees? And is it per transaction, or what percent are they actually taking? Is it really worthwhile? Companies that can help you get some transparency into that is something I would consider moving towards. Touchless payments and ordering. Sydney mentioned it already, but crucial, necessary to create a contact-free environment right now. So find companies that can help you with that. Guest communication. We're going to talk real specifically about guest communication, but consider there can be technology that can help you with this as well. It's funny, Sydney, there were a lot of trends technology-wise in the restaurant world that we thought, oh, yeah, we're maybe headed towards this, or, oh, that might be something cool eventually, but let's see how it plays out. Well, guess what? The pandemic has really hit the fast forward button on a lot of these, and many of them are here now. So you might as well lean in, participate, take advantage of them, because there's some really cool ways to leverage technology out there. With that being said, though, there's also an overwhelming amount of companies out there when it comes to the technology and helping restaurants. I want you to remember that RSI, we're here to help you. We've partnered with a large portfolio of restaurant-specific vendors that could help or add value to your business. We really want it to be like you get the VIP treatment or VIP pricing for being an RSI client. So many times we do have preferred pricing or integration. So my suggestion is, when you're in doubt or when you're looking for something like that, when in doubt, reach out. Let us know what you're looking for. We can point you towards the right partnerships or at least someone you should consider, because we've done some research on them as well. No matter what vendor you're working with or what vendor you choose, you need to make sure they aligned with your brand goals. And always, most important, they're helping you build top-line sales and work towards your goals.
And I think that was, the main answer in poll question number one. My concern is, how do we start building these sales back up? It will be essential that you continue to market your establishment to start building on that top line again. But again, it all comes down to trust. The consumers need to trust that everything is going to be health and safe for them. So make sure that that trust is forefront in your mind. And in theirs, and you build trust through transparency. And that's where it really comes down to, with the marketing, et cetera. You've got to be making sure that you're leveraging all of those social media platforms. If you're like me, it's like, do I have to do Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, et cetera? It can be really overwhelming. But it has been the most successful way to reach out to clients during this pandemic. And it's going to continue to be the contributing factor on communication to your guests. So you got to embrace it. And I want you guys to really start thinking of social media, not as social media, but digital hospitality. I mean, that is going to be a buzzword moving forward. every single business needs to build around digital hospitality. You know, the restaurant business we're in this hospitality business. And if everything's going to digital and AI and mobile and touchless and everything's, you know, done through our mobile apps, et cetera, then how are we going to be practicing that hospitality that we're so known for? So not only through social media, but your website, online ordering, your delivery platforms, Google reviews, business pages, everything you've got to think about. So with everything turning to that digital world, we've got to pivot to that. You know, we live in an Amazon Prime world. So ask Blockbuster how they feel about Netflix right now. I know it's daunting, but no one knows your brand better than you. So you as the owner, you know, for owners of your establishment, you got to embrace social media, and you've got to do it now if you haven't already. And the first easiest way to build trust or transparency is through video. You know, do a 30-second video. If you're the owner, the community and wants to see your face, they want to embrace you. They want to feel like they know you. So do a 30-second video showing them what you've done inside the restaurant, or telling them how you've implemented those recent changes to comply with the guidelines, et cetera. Educate your guests on exactly what those measures that you've put into place to ensure their safety. Share with them their stories on how your staff are surviving and, you know, thriving, hopefully, through this. And share how you're touching the community and what they can look forward to when you open back up. You know, and it's not only just used as an educational platform, but promotional as well. You know, put out all those new offerings and what promotions you have going on. Continuously be updating them on that. Loyalty programs, reward programs, things like that. We've also seen some really great video posts from clients that are connecting with their local community through digital. So embrace your community. Have them also help put out digital things. They want to know you. They want to connect with you. You know, so be creative, be innovative. Something else that you guys should consider, have you reached out to your local news stations? You know, we've got a couple clients in California that literally have been on the news probably 20 times since COVID started. They're constantly doing little news stories, et cetera. All of your local news anchors, reporters, stations, the directors, they're all on Twitter. They're monitoring Twitter incessantly. If you're not posting on Twitter and tweeting to your local favorite news anchor, you know, start doing it now. Many of them are watching these Twitter posts, and they're going to reach out to you if you post something that resonates with them. I mean, they have never been more eager to tell the independent restaurant owner story than they are right now. So for those people that have been reaching out and doing those news stories, it's been a huge boost from the community on coming in and getting those sales back in. The most important thing that you have to do right now is you have to stay relevant. So continue to listen to your guests. You know, Brian said it probably 5 times already, but be ready to pivot because the changes are going to continue to happen throughout the rest of the year and into next year. So you have to be on top of your game every single step of the way. And I think that probably leads us right into our next poll question, Brian.
Let's do it. Another poll question. Our last one of the day, so make sure you get your answers in. And the question is, are you changing your brand or concept for reopening? And you can go all the way from no, not at all, to maybe you're incorporating better to go. Maybe your packaging on signature items or sauces is changing. Maybe it's just delivery is going to be a much larger revenue center for you. Or maybe it's an overhaul or a streamlined menu. I've said it with other poll questions, Sydney. Yes, there could be more than one that applies to you. Yeah, but I just want you to pick the most meaningful answer for you.
You know, I think, Brian, when we created these questions, we were hoping everybody would say yes to everything. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, what are the results?
All right, results are in. This one is actually split down the middle. And you know what? These two are really related to each other as well. It was incorporating better to go and delivery being a larger revenue center. And I think those are two things that are here to stay, right?
I know. We may not have wanted it a year ago, but hey, it's here. It's not going anywhere.
Absolutely. Pivot. We'll say it for a 10th time.
Sure.
Okay, so that being said, let's talk a little bit about your website. So we've spoken a lot about communication. You've heard us say a lot about communication. You've heard us say a lot about trust. you got to get this right. The best way to communicate right now to your guest is through your website. As a guest, you're deciding where you're going to get your to-go food, or you're deciding where you're going to go out to eat. You're going to do some research ahead of time to see what a restaurant's doing, and browsing the internet is going to be how many guests are deciding whether or not to go and eat at your establishment. So again, get it right. And let's talk about what I mean by getting it right. We've talked about being relevant, making sure you're relevant. We've talked about your website being revenue driven. Is it building top line sales? Is it helping you build top line sales? Featuring promotions. Is it visual? 10 seconds to catch your eye when somebody's browsing the internet. Are you featuring those pictures that are accomplishing that and that are catching somebody's eye? To-go friendly. This one, man, I've seen some restaurants get this really right, and I've seen some restaurants get this really wrong. And I'm talking personally, when I'm going with my family and deciding, let's order out tonight. If I go to the website and there's nothing about COVID-19 or nothing about adjustments they've made or nothing easy to understand about how to do the to-go or online ordering, man, I'm not really going to waste my time. I'm going to go to the next restaurant. And sometimes, man, it is a cumbersome process, and I can't even tell if they're open or closed or open for to-go only, or man, be loud and proud and make it easy. The last thing a customer wants to do is be confused about how to navigate your website, right?
Yeah, and I would also be mobile friendly on that website for sure.
For sure. Good point.
Yeah.
I'll be the boomer who's doing it the old way on a computer. You can be the one on your phone looking it up. Also, and we've mentioned this a few times today too. And by the way, things we mention over and over again, please consider that. That's because we're trying to get a point across, right? But keep it local. Sydney did a great job of describing some restaurants that are doing that really well. But the restaurants that have proven and been loud about being part of the community, man, that's who's going to draw the guests in, and what a great way to market yourself, right?
Yeah, and don't forget, with the website, if you're putting in PDF menus, they're not going to be Google searchable. You've got to have text in that website for, any keywords to be drawn up when they do an SEO lookup. And make sure you're leveraging your Google business pages. Those are free. Make sure you've got all of your keywords built on that, et cetera. But you've got to make sure your website not only is mobile friendly, but is revenue driven in multiple areas, from gift cards to, anything else that you're offering. But it is key, Brian. Definitely.
Really important, yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, mentioned it a few times, but I also want to mention again, at RSI, we really pride ourselves in the education and, more importantly, the people behind the system. So please don't feel like you're on an island by yourself right now. Reach out to us, have us help. Sydney, in the last couple months, I've gotten to know so many of our clients on a much deeper level, going through those break-even analysis or budgeting, or talking through the really clear and easy to understand PPP or SBA loan stuff. We really hear great stories of what restaurants across the nation are doing, and we like to share those best practices. So look for those alerts that come up on your website when you're in there. We put a lot of thought behind those, and a lot of restaurants have found them very helpful. And always don't hesitate to reach out for advice, because that's what we love doing. Is we love helping restaurants, and we love being part of that restaurant community.
Absolutely. Well, I know we are running late, so we've got time for just a couple questions, Brian.
All right, let's get to the questions. And thank you for those of you who have gotten questions in. Sid, the first one I'm going to read is actually pretty much a compilation of a lot of questions that we've gotten, not just today, but also in previous webinars. And I'm not surprised again. It always comes up. there's a question about the PPP loan and how do you maximize the amount that's forgiven. We've gotten multiple questions about this. This is really tough. So I'll go ahead and take this one. So first off, your first resource should probably be your lender, because your lender is going to make that ultimate decision on how much is going to be forgiven, and then it's up to them to deal with the SBA and the government. There are definitely guidelines out there that we can help you with. There's lots of tools and resources on the RSI website. Again, in training and education, we have a whole PPP task force and compliance team who's putting together frequently asked questions that, to be honest with you, covers 95% of the questions that I've gotten about the PPP loan, including how do you understand how to maximize how much is forgiven. And there's even, it's a moving target too, right, Sydney? There's a change that's probably coming this week. I think we're all anxiously waiting for some votes to come in. Yeah.
Yeah, so hold tight on that question. You know, we don't stress out too much about it. Let's see what happens this week, and obviously get those new guidelines and, you know, stipulations, et cetera. But again, you know, you have a resource at RSI. You can reach out to us and we'll have that information then. Absolutely.
So the answer to that is reach out, and yes, don't feel bad for being confused, because man,
we've only got like 500. Yeah, we have tons of questions. Yeah. All right, one more.
Okay, one more. Sydney, I'll shoot this one your way, because I know you've had a lot of good experience with this with some of the restaurants you've been working with. But let's see, we have recently started using delivery services. If this is going to be a bigger part of our revenue moving forward, should we move to doing delivery ourselves? What are other restaurants doing?
It's a great question.
Common. Yes.
Yeah, very common, and actually it's starting to get more and more common that people are bringing delivery in-house. Maybe it first started with let's bring it in-house to use some of those PPP funds, but now it's coming more, especially with those that were really successful with the, you know, pivoting to delivery and to go, and they've had a pretty decent revenue streams, and there have definitely been some that have been extremely successful during the pandemic. But yeah, they're definitely evaluating, you know, they've reached out to their insurance broker to see what type of the liability is to have those delivery drivers in-house. They're using 5-6 different delivery platforms, and the fees are, you know, starting to become astronomical, and the deferment on those fees is going to be gone here soon. So it's definitely something that you should consider if it is going to be a large percentage of your revenue stream. Then yes, you've got to crunch the numbers on it. What type of fees are coming out of, you know, your delivery right now, and how great of an online ordering program and website do you have to really be able to handle the demand coming straight to your website versus those third-party delivery vendors. I do think it's a great idea, you know, if it's something that makes sense for you. And again, that some evaluation will go into that. A great question.
Yeah, you have to run the numbers. And the other thing I'll throw in, Sydney, is we're seeing states and cities that are putting caps on some of those fees in regard to what a third-party delivery service can charge in regards to fees. So consider that. Maybe the fees aren't going to be quite as high as you thought they were going to be. But again, we talked about in our last webinar, the difference between deferral and abatement. If they're deferring those fees, you are going to have to pay those down the road. They didn't just disappear, right?
All right, I think we're out of time today. What I want to personally leave you with is that I did visit Arizona this last weekend, Memorial Day weekend, and restaurants were open and thriving. Business was strong in all of the dining rooms. The staff did an amazing job, you know, making us feel comfortable and safe. There was 6 feet apart. One thing I did notice as well is that, you know, I didn't really feel like there was a 50% capacity. I went into a full dining room, but every table, you know, was appropriately, you know, apart from each other. San Diego opened recently as well, where I currently live. I went out this weekend, and it was a great feeling to go out there and start seeing these restaurants open and doing well. So I do feel confident that sales will come back and you guys will be successful in reopening, and best of luck to each and every one of you. You know, I love the restaurant industry, and I'm so excited to be a part of it, and I really hope to see you guys on the other side of this.
Sid, thank you so much for your time today. Everyone on the webinar, thank you for joining, participating. We'll be sending a follow-up with a link to this recording as well, but it'll also be available in training and education on your RSI Profit Center website too. All right. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.